in the howling darkness of the end. Men will become monsters. But hope will ride with those courageous enough to carry the flame.
Darkest Dungeon 2. My personal ideas, what I would think would be fun to have included in the sequel to the successful release of Red Hook Studio Darkest Dungeon title. Now don't get me wrong, I'm quite sure that the creators have this really nicely planned out already, at least I hope so. Well, they did surprise the hell out of me with all the content and all the amazing added content with the DLCs that have been added, and from an indie developer, man, all the large publishers should be really on a lookout. But since you clicked on the video, how about we go through the list of my ideas?
Not Your Professional Walkthroughs channel presents
Number 1. Heat Management. Now, for you to understand the concept, we need to look over the trailer where the heroes are overlooking an abyss and this large mountain, and it's snowing outside. The book based on which this should be based on is called The Mountains of Madness. Now, I have personally never read it, so I cannot tell you exactly what's it about, but these are just some of my ideas on the subject matter, so please hear me out. Now, if I'm correct, which usually I'm not, Darkest Dungeon 2 should be inspired by another Lovecraftian piece of art. This would be the Mountains of the Madness, as I have stated before, where an expedition is on one of the Arctic cycles and they come across these ruins that go into the darkest depths. So if we were to think of the apprentice level raids to be at the surface where the daylight can still reach, it's possibly warmer, so your heroes are not as badly affected by the cold. But the deeper we go in the veteran or champion level raids at the very bottom, where managing light and temperature would be important, as the torches and camping can obtain a brand new concept of status, for example body temperature. The lower the temperature, the higher the chance your hero's speed will be dropped, and it will be easier for the heroes to also get sick. So the disease would have more of an effect, and if you would have a hero with, let's say, pneumonia or something like that, they will not be able to go for another raid for a while, and also you would not be able to kick them out of your roster. So the body temperature leads me to point number 2. Armor and its variety. You see, in Darkest Dungeon 1, you have classes, and all you can do is upgrade their levels of armor and weapons, but with this setting and the potential of coming across the temperature as a feature, if we would be able to obtain armor from the drops of enemies with variety, we would have options for more experimentation with how to build a class. Let's say a light armor would only be able to keep your hero warm for a few engagements before he would need to camp out again, but on the other hand, your speed would be higher, so you would have better chance to go before the enemy units, but also the defense would be decreased, so your survival if hit would suffer. Now, in order to compensate with that, we would have more bulky or furry armor. So think like a big fur coat with armor plating under it. like when you were watching Game of Thrones and Jon Snow was riding around with coat on top of the armor. This would increase your defense stat, giving you a bigger resistance against the cold, but on the other hand, did you guess it? Yes, your speed would suffer by it greatly, so despite being able to get hit a few more times and survive, you would have to offset it with boosts from your trinket or party members. And the more we would be able to experiment with builds and more fun we would be able to have, as usually what happens with Darkest Dungeon is that if we get a patch updates, the stats change, and based on that people change the trinkets they equip, use slightly different composition, but overall it's not that much of a dramatic change. And with the freedom to equip these varieties of armors, we would have always chance to experiment, and we would be forced to try and compete in some of the parts of the new world to either obtain parts for the armor or to build some hybrid hero with which we can have lots of fun. And this can potentially create lots of potential either for mods or for content for YouTube creators, for example, where you would recommend, let's say, a jester in a thick, bulky coat of armor who would be able to do God knows what. Number 3. Map of the world and its possibilities. Since we would be taking about this ancient ruins going in a large spiral down into the eternal darkness, it would be interesting if we would need to send out expeditions to these posts, and from said posts we would be able to launch missions. So we would have a surface level, let's say, that would allow us to do apprentice level raids. We would then move to the lower base, where we would come across veteran level raids, and even deeper in the ruins to get to the last camp, from which we can deal with the final bosses or champion level raids. And in order to keep this interesting, we would have to send supply missions from surface to the other camps, otherwise we would be able to lose set posts and potentially even the heroes, as with the darkness comes the ambush. Now, this can potentially leave room for like a survival type of mission like the XCOM games, when your base is under attack by the aliens and you need to defend it, but the attacks would keep on coming, so the supplies would need to reach the post. Number 4. Give more work to Wayne. Obviously, one of the key components for Darkest Dungeon is the narrator done by Wayne June, who should return to the sequel. Now, don't get me wrong, in the base game he has plenty to say, sometimes at the worst moments, so we end up talking one over another, but maybe just giving him a bigger budget to record a lot more, I would personally love that. Number 5. New enemies and larger scale of variations. You see, today it's almost impossible to make an RPG game without the undead or skeletons in it, so I don't mind. But if we would see the same units from Darkest Dungeon 1, I would be a bit disappointed, as based on the stories from certain boss battles,
I brought my colleagues back with much of their intellect intact. A remarkable triumph for even the most experienced necromancer. Freed from the trappings of their humanity, they plied their terrible trade anew, the dead reviving the dead, on and on down the years. Forever.
we know how these skeletons came a reality in the area of Hamlet. But these are different ruins out here, and in order for the curse of the ancestor to reach this new area and to reuse the same units, it would just seem too lazy for me. So please, please come up with some different skeletons or undead. Thank you. Since I was talking about heat management, we can potentially utilize frozen skeletons or previous expeditions which were not so successful, and since they all froze to death, thanks to the ancient powers within the ruins, they become the undead enemies which we have to face off. One of the ideas. Go crazy. I came up with this just like that, so I'm quite sure the team behind Red Hook Studios can come up with something much better. Number 6. Possibility to research tech. So this can come from multiple steps, obviously. For example, utilizing some of your heroes, like let's say Plague Doctor, to study what you collect on your raids and build better tech for you. So instead of torches, you would construct lanterns, for example, and the lanterns would keep light for longer, but would not keep your party so warm, etc, etc. Or let's say upgrading the armor, making better gear. So even if we would, for example, not utilize the heroes themselves to research the tech, instead of having a blacksmith, we would invest into research stations at the encampments, allowing for faster research, and so on and so on. Number 7. Having a individual hero have his own backpack and a different amount of slots available to carry provisions and loot, and also the potential to have more party members. So what would be the point of this? Obviously, with the experimentation of the different armors and their varieties and the hybrid builds against possible larger amounts of even enemy groups, and when it comes to the individual backpacks, for example, think of how you want to have Antiquarian when it comes to getting gold. What if getting some new class of hero who can carry a lot of provisions but would suck at battles? So switch things up. Obviously, there will need to be some resource management, and I would think that having food would especially be important, as here food cannot grow, so it's either by hunting the creatures for provisions or supply runs from the top to the bottom encampments, or potentially getting something like even broken weapons and being able to fix them. And for example, hunting the big game that would live around the large mountain can give you the fur for the armor, or food for parties, and for example fat to burn for the lanterns. So we would have an interesting gaming cycle already just from some of the ideas I have mentioned here. But honestly, who knows what we will get with the sequel. These are just some of the ideas I have been thinking of lately, and I would love to hear what would be your ideas in the comment section. What are your expectations for the sequel? Are you expecting more? Are you expecting the same amount just with different setting? Are you looking forward to the sequel, or you don't care at all? Do let me know. I do read the comment section, and heck, if you liked it, maybe subscribe, and I will see you at the next one. Thank you for watching. This was Max from Not Your Professional Walkthroughs channel, and I will see you at the next one. Bye bye.